wherever you may be, or good evening, because I know people are joining us from all over. We have a great program for you today. My name is Flora Coker, and I'm the founder of Encapsulate Healthcare Solutions. But a special welcome to people who are joining us for the first time. Encapsulate Healthcare Solution is an organization that is keen to help people to make better choices about their health with the right information. So we have two programs. This one is called Own Your Health, which is for the general public, which is a health awareness program. We've covered so many different topics over the last 2 to 3 years. We've done looking after your skin, we've done mental health. We've talked about how medicines work and how medicines are made. The other program that we do as an organization is a free training to healthcare professionals in Nigeria to improve their skills in wound management so that they can provide a better service to patients who have wounds. So those are our two main projects, and we have other services which I'll talk about later. Right. So we're going to go straight to our first speaker for the afternoon. Bumi, before I do that, housekeeping, please.
Yes, please. Just to let everyone know that we are on Zoom. We're going to have a few minutes break later on, but please do make sure that you're muted. If you need to speak, we will unmute you at any point in time. Also to let you know that questions are always at the back of a speaker finishing speaking. So once the speaker finishes, we would also encourage you to please put your questions in the chat as we get along, and we would put your questions to the speaker after the speaker's finished. Thank you, and please get your water bottles, I've got mine, and just your notepad and your pen, and yeah, loads of knowledge will be shared, I can guarantee that. So happy listening, thank you.
All right, thank you, Bumi. So our first speaker for this afternoon is Dr. Abiola Oyeleye. He obtained his medical degree from the University of Lagos and a postgraduate degree fellowship of the Royal College of Ophthalmologists in the UK. He also has a postgraduate diploma in health systems management from the University of London. He's a consultant ophthalmologist and the founder of the Eye Doctors Group of clinics in Lagos, Nigeria. He's also the president of the Ophthalmological Society of Nigeria and the coordinator of District 404 Lions Club Vision Committee. So Dr. Oyeleye will start, and our second speaker, Dr. Christiana Dina. She's also a consultant ophthalmologist and a medical retina specialist. She's the Director of Research and Innovation at London Northwest University Healthcare NHS Trust. So she will chip in her own comments on our first session on looking after your eyes. So over to you both. Thank you. I've unmuted you, Dr. Oyeleye. Bumi, slides, please.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Oyeleye, as I've been introduced. I just have a first few minutes of introduction about how we look after our eyes. Now, in general terms, there are 5 senses in the body, or 5 major senses. Depending on what text you read, there obviously they say there are more than 5 major senses. But the 5 major senses, as we know them, are number 1, sight, number 2, touch, smell, taste, and hearing. Sight, touch, smell, taste, and hearing. And of these 5, by far the most important is our eyes. There's so many quotes about our eyes, but the one that comes straight to me is the eyes are the lamp of the body. And like I said, there are a lot of general things about looking after your eyes. Now, the important thing, first of all, is you should stay in charge of your eyes. Don't wait until you have problems. Just ensure that you have regular checks. And if there's any suspicion of any problem, seek professional help. The most common question I get asked when they're talking about eyes is diets, and what should we eat and what shouldn't we eat. Now, it's good to have a mixed or balanced diet with a lot of green vegetables. People talk a lot about carrots, which are a good source of vitamin A. And a lot of vegetables are also a good source of antioxidants within the body. And what antioxidants are basically, or vitamins and antioxidants, they sort of clear what we call the free radicals within our system. Sometimes we could say the byproducts of metabolism. They clear them out of the system, and they're quite helpful. In terms of the environment is getting, at least in Nigeria, is getting more and more polluted. And the sunlight is becoming more and more of a problem. Now, to protect your eyes from the ultraviolet rays, what we advocate is you get sunglasses, which have the ultraviolet protection. If you're a sportsman or sports lady, wear your protective eyewear for your sports. And like I said, the important thing is to have routine tests. Now, there's a condition we'll talk about a bit later called glaucoma. Glaucoma doesn't have any symptoms at all. And the only way you can detect it is by having a routine eye test. So having a routine eye test incorporated into your general health checks, it's a very important thing. And like I had said at the beginning, treat your eyes earlier rather than later if you have any problems is very important in eye care. So I'll hand over to my co-speaker, who will talk a bit more in general terms about eye care. Thank you very much. Dr. Dina.
Thank you so much for that brilliant overview. And in terms of general eye care, I completely agree with what Dr. Oyele has said. The key messaging, and with anything, you want to take 2 to 3 key messaging away. And the key messaging is eyesight is the core and the most valued sense across the world in various geographies. That's been proven by evidence. So, and most people don't know how much they value eye health or their eyesight until something's wrong with it. There's also evidence that we even value eyesight more the older we get. And that might be linked to the fact that the other things we're able to do, we may be more restricted as we get older, and then your eyesight really comes to the fore. So again, maintaining your eye health, not just for now, but for the extent of your lifespan is really important. And that's where nutrition comes into play. I'll start off by saying that one of my main interests is research. I'm always thinking about how can we do better? How can we know more about how to look after ourselves? And a lot of the research done in terms of nutrition and eye health hasn't necessarily been done in Africans. So much of what we talk about, like, for instance, the Mediterranean diet has been shown to be very protective against aging eye diseases. I'm not sure that has been checked, particularly in Africans. So, but that particular diet has been shown in other populations to be very, very good for your eye health and involves a diet rich in fish oils. So, oily fish, rich in green vegetables, much as Dr. Yele mentioned, and also essentially rich in tree nuts like almonds and cashews and walnuts, which are things that I think a lot of Africans tend to eat in our diet. So, you know, healthy fats, whole grain breads and cereals and pasta, herbs and spices, and obviously no or limited salt. So those things are supposed to help eye health, but I do think there's scope for research in an African population to see what works best for us. So that's one thing. The other thing to note is the importance of regular checkups. I would say if you have no eye symptoms, so if you feel like your vision is fine, then at least once in 2 years with a trusted optometrist. An optometrist generally, I think it works differently in different continents, but essentially an optician would be the person that you would go to get your eyes checked to see whether you need glasses. And oftentimes they can do basic eye examinations. But if they can't in your area where you live, then seeing an eye doctor is valid. So at least make sure that your general eye health is looked after. Because as Dr. Yele said, there are quite a lot of eye conditions that do not have eye symptoms, both front of the eye conditions and back of the eye conditions, and that become obvious to you when things are advanced and possibly too late for us to actually reverse the sight loss that may have happened. So from that perspective, at least checking in every 2 years or so is valid. And I would say also, I know we've got mainly adults here, but particularly for children, it is important that they are seen by an eye care practitioner at least before they're 5. Routinely, normally what happens is when at childbirth, you know, a very basic eye screen should be done, because conditions such as cataract, for instance, some children, some babies are born with it. And if it's not picked up early and treated early, when it's finally obvious, sometimes the vision cannot recover. And yes, you can take out the cataract, but then the eye sight never actually develops, because that's such a critical stage where the eye needs stimulation. So having a baby, when you have a baby or when a baby is born, it's important to have a cursory, quick eye check, just to check that actually the things are behaving the way they should. And then before a child is 5 as well, important to check, because we know that things like what we call squints, and a squint is where both eyes are not looking in the same direction. There's many lay ways of describing that. Some might say cross-eyed, but those are not terms that I would use. I would say a squint, and this is where both eyes are not looking in the same direction. And it's important that that is picked up as well early in a child, so that the stimulation to the direction of the 2 eyes can be corrected, and the stimulation to both eyes can be adequate, and then the vision at least can have the highest possible chance of developing to its full potential. So just to round off there, I would say, in terms of the lifespan, you know, when a baby is born, worth doing a cursory eye check in the hospital usually, and then before 5 as well. And then as you're growing up, at least every couple of years, so that diseases that may occur for various reasons can be picked up before they are at an advanced stage. And in the meantime, maintaining your nutrition to maintain eye health, and protecting your eyes, as Dr. Yelea said, but also if you notice symptoms, and I think we'll be talking about symptoms later, that suggest your eyes are not working as best as they could, then absolutely getting that looked at as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dina. All right, okay. So do we have any questions about looking after your eyes before we move to the next section, as it were? If you do have any questions, you can put them in the chat, or you can just raise your hand. Do we have any questions about looking after your eyes?
None in the chat, but if you have a question, please just use the virtual, put your hands up and we can unmute you.
No? Okay.
Okay,
All
yes,
right.
I do. iPhone B. Wherever you are, I've asked you to unmute.
Hello, hello. I just have one question. I found out that whenever you go, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Whenever you go to the opticians, they always have a reason why you need glasses. So it's sort of I'm talking about in the UK. So it's sort of you're like, why should I go when they will tell me I need glasses? When my kids were younger, I took them to the opticians and they said they all needed glasses. They wore it for a week. And since then, over 10 years, they've not worn those glasses and they see perfectly well.
Okay.
Right. Since you said in the UK, I'll let Dr. Dina take that question.
And I would like to add also that my daughter actually really wanted glasses. She really, really thought glasses was something fashionable. And she did say that, oh, Mom, I really want glasses. I don't see at all. So we went to the optician. No, they did say she doesn't need glasses. Just to say that, I don't think it's every. I'm just trying to debunk that.
I am very thankful that you said that, because I do not want to anger opticians because we work very closely together. What I will say, I understand what you're saying about glasses, and I think there's a difference between, I say this to my patients all the time, there's a difference between noting a slight difference in terms of function, or we use the word refraction, which is the ability to focus, which is what opticians do. They check how well you're focusing and whether or not a bit of a tweak would improve that, or whether you need, significant lenses. And as you said, typically what would happen is if whatever is found doesn't seem to be significant, usually that will not be prescribed. But sometimes, if you feel like, for instance, when you're looking at a chart, because when you go to an optician, they check your, they measure how well you can see by, putting various lenses and seeing what letters you can see. And if they find that, okay, your vision improves a little bit with this particular lens, they might give it to you. But in reality, your visual function is really determined by what you need to see and your everyday life. So you could find that your kids were prescribed those glasses. And yes, maybe it enabled them to see a little bit better, but in practice, that's not useful for their day-to-day life. They don't need that extra tiny little bit of resolution for them to be able to function. So from that perspective, there can be a difference between what is prescribed and what is needful. And what I would advise is, where it's possible, sticking to the same optometrist or optician, because then you build a relationship, and they're really a value add to the community in terms of eye care health. And having a stable one, like the way you'd have a stable GP, is really useful, because then they get to know you, and then you can go from just being a customer or client to actually being actually building a strong relationship where your needs are met. But yes, what you've described isn't rare. People do say that. And also opticians are a business. So there's that to weigh in there as well.
Okay.
That's my politically correct answer.
I was about to say yes. Dr. Yeleye, do you want to add anything? Oh yeah, still pleading the fifth.
I've got a few more questions.
She said it all. She said it all.
All right, thank you. All right, go ahead, Bumi.
So from Olabode Daramola, I think I kind of recognize that name. You've been here before. Welcome back, sir. Please, can any of the doctors speak to pterygium, whatever that means? And why do I have pain in my eyes when I am hungry or thirsty? Why my eyes?
Okay, who's taking that one?
Dr. Yeleye.
Right, okay. Should I talk about pterygium? Now, we're having a talk about the conditions affecting the front of the eye.
Okay.
So probably it's better we take the pterygium question then,
Okay.
even though it wasn't one of those I highlighted, conditions affecting the front, but that's where the pterygium comes in. So perhaps we should discuss that a bit later.
Okay.
Or would you like me to take that question now?
No, we can do that later.
Okay.
Okay. And
More
then the second question.
questions? I've been diagnosed with glaucoma.
No, hang
for
on a
10
minute. Hold on.
But
Bumi,
why do I have pain in my eyes when I'm hungry or thirsty? Why my
Yes.
eyes?
Difficult one to answer. I'm assuming he's not having pain in his eyes at any other time. Is that right?
Olabo, did you want to unmute yourself? Please, can you unmute him so that he can
Yes, I've asked him to unmute.
clarify?
Okay, thank you very much. It usually happens when I don't get to eat on time. You know, that's when it does happen. So, but once I eat and I drink water, I realize that, okay, it goes down. So it happens usually maybe when I'm fasting or if I don't get to eat on time, I'm really badly hungry. So why does it have to be my eyes? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm struggling to think about the answer to that question. How old are you, sir? Oh, sorry, how old are you?
Let's get him back.
Is there any history of dry eyes?
I've asked him to unmute.
Yeah, look, no dry eyes.
How old are you, sorry?
I'm over 40.
Over 40 years.
Yeah.
No, I'm not certain why you should have pain.
Because I've actually
Yeah.
complained to whether is there an ophthalmologist or optician? I don't know which
Yes.
one. Of course, they have given me glasses anyways, you know.
No.
So
no, I'm really, Dr. Dinner, do you want to help out there?
You're on mute, yeah.
Okay, great. So I agree. I don't think there's a physiological reason why the two would be connected. Just thinking, like most things, when we ask questions that are not obviously related, we try to work back from what we call first principles. So just trying to understand the connections between, hunger, and which is basically, your brain and the connection between your brain and your stomach, as well as your eyesight. And I can't think of a reason why that would be correlated. So I would be thinking that is a coincidence. On the other hand, what Dr. Oyele said earlier about dry eyes, maybe we're thinking about, because to some extent, you could say that it is possible that if you've got dry eyes, and you mentioned fasting and so on, maybe this is correlating with the fact that you're just not producing enough tears, and it's worsened at those times of extreme hunger, potentially, and then you feel, the pain in your eyes. You didn't really go into detail about the sort of pain, because pain is quite a range. Dry eyes has a specific type of pain, which tends to be like stinging, or it could feel like there's sand in your eye. So when you blink, it's like there's little bits in the eye. Or sometimes it can feel like almost like you've got air conditioning blowing in the eyes. So those sort of things can, if that's the sort of pain you're describing, then the tear film or the tear surface could be the reason why that is occurring. But there's different types of pain, eye pain. So it would depend on the sort of pain you're experiencing at those times of hunger.
All right, thank you both. Because of time, we'll take the rest. One more question, and then we'll take the rest at the end. So, Bumi, and what's the next one?
Okay. So the next question says that, sorry, I'm just trying to go back up. Okay. It says, I've been diagnosed with glaucoma for 10 years now. I've been on Salatan eye drops since then. I begin to experience eye dryness in the morning lately, irrespective of if I use the Xalatan or not. What advice do you have for me?
Right. Okay. Glaucoma is going to come up later on the talk, but I'll just sort of like try and address what he said about glaucoma and the dryness of his eyes and the fact that he's in drops. Now, most eye drops give you a side effect of having dry eyes. And it's not the eye drops only themselves, it's what we call the preservatives. If you have an eye drop and you want it to last long on the shelf or in the bottle, we add preservatives to them when they're being manufactured. Now, it is these preservatives when you've used the drops for a long time that cause the eyes to go dry. And obviously, some types of drops more than others. And latanoprost, which you mentioned, that's another name for Xalatan, is one of those drops in that category. You find out now that what a lot of manufacturers are doing is to manufacture these particular drops without preservatives. And that's usually preferable. However, it's more expensive. And just to give you an idea, in Nigeria, if you have a preparation that doesn't have preservatives and a preparation that has preservatives, the one without preservatives could be 3 to 4 times more expensive than the same drug with preservatives. So I hope that answers the question very quickly, even though we'll talk more about glaucoma. Dr. Dina, are you talking about glaucoma or am I talking about glaucoma? Is that the front or the back of the eye? You're muted, sorry.
Right, I'm very much a back of the eye person. So
and the optic
glaucoma at all.
And the optic nerve is at the back of the eye. So you said you'll tell.
This is true. This is true.
Yes. Anyway, we'll both talk about it at some stage.
Fair
it always comes up. Yeah.
All right, great. Okay, so let's go on to your the next session then, Dr. Yele. Let's talk about the conditions that affect the front of the eye. So the audience are probably wanting front of the eye, back of the eye. Which one is it? Yes, there's the front bit and there's the back bit that you cannot see. So Dr. Yele, over to you. Bumi, please, could you share his slide? Thank you.
Right. The reason why we've divided the talk to the front of the eye and the back of the eye is just to make things a bit easier for people to understand. So I'll start with giving a quick lesson on anatomy, the anatomy of the eye. Basically, you have the front of the eye, and what everybody sees is the colored part of the eye. That colored part of the eye is called the iris. It's actually inside the eye. Over the iris, you have a tissue called the cornea, which is transparent. Because it's transparent, people don't actually usually see the cornea and talk about the cornea, but then it loses its transparency in some disease conditions. So in terms of my anatomy lessons, I've mentioned the cornea, the front of the eye, and then the iris, the colored bit of the eye. The center of the iris, there's a small dark aperture, which is called the pupil. So you have a round pupil in the center of the iris. And behind the iris and the pupil is the lens. So from the cornea, you have a space in the eye where there's fluid. Then you have the iris, and in the middle of the iris, you have the pupil, and then the lens. So that's talking about the inside of the eye. Now, the outside of the eye, everybody sees the white part of the eye. The white part of the eye is actually covered by another transparent layer of tissue called the conjunctiva, whilst the white part, we call it the sclera. So in my talk, I'm going to try and limit myself to the conditions that affect the front of the eye. Like I'd mentioned briefly in the past, there's a condition we call glaucoma, which has problems or originates from problems in the front of the eye and manifests at the back of the eye. But we'll go to, I think I've finished my anatomy lesson. Now, the first one I'd want to mention, okay, the slide is up there. Could I have the previous slide? Fantastic, cataracts. And the reason why I want to talk about cataracts first is because the cataract is the most common cause of blindness worldwide. And blindness from cataracts is reversible. The cataract is the lens in the eye which has become cloudy. And the number one cause of cataracts is age. The number two cause, age. Number three cause, age. And the reason why I'm stressing the age factor is because we will all develop cataracts as we get older. In fact, I go to some talks and I start with an opening prayer that may we all develop cataracts, and everybody keeps quiet. The reason why I'm saying that is cataract is just a condition where the lens in the eye has gone cloudy. And the most common cause is age. So at some stage of our lives, if we live long enough, we should look forward to getting cataracts. The other causes of cataracts, it might be from some other eye diseases. It might be from general diseases within the body that is manifesting as a cataract in the eye. We have a condition called uveitis or iritis, where there's a lot of inflammation in the body. It can lead to some changes in the eye. You have diabetes, which we'll talk about later, and quite a few other conditions. Also, some medication we take could cause cataracts. So it's important that when you see your doctor and he says you have cataracts, he or she will probably ask you about a history of medication you use, and just to see whether that could have any bearing on the cataracts. So the clouding of the natural lens in the eye is called a cataract. It's the most common cause of blindness, and blindness from cataracts is reversible by a simple operation called cataract surgery. When I say a simple operation, what I'm trying to stress on is that the vast majority of cataract operations are successful, and the success rate is in the 90s in terms of percent. A lot of people refuse to have cataract surgery because they will say, oh, my grandfather had cataract surgery, it didn't go right, he or she couldn't see after the operation, things like that. But the important thing to know is that when cataract surgery is done correctly, the chances of success are more than 90%, going up to about 95, 98%. Never 100%, no operation boasts of 100%, but cataract surgery is seen as one of, if not the most successful operation worldwide. So as I've said, the definitive treatment, if you have cataracts, is an operation. However, in the early stages, you'd go for a sight test, and they might find out that altering the prescription of your glasses may help you see better. So that's another reason why your glasses may be changed, or they might actually ask you to update your glasses, because the cataracts might cause a bit of what we call a refractive error. And the cataracts, and then the glasses may need to be changed before we talk about surgery. Now, I just mentioned refractive error, and the refractive error is the most common cause of visual disability in the world, i.e., you need a pair of glasses and you don't have glasses. And if you look at the slides, it's number 3 on the slides, the one on the furthermost to the right. So usually, as Dr. Dina said, we'd like children to have a first eye test when they are born by just basically looking at their eyes. And then at different levels of education, just before you start primary school, about the age of 4 or 5, as you're leaving primary school to secondary school, or leaving secondary school to university. However, if at any stage you've been found to need glasses, then don't wait 4 or 5 years before you have an eye test as a child. Have it more regularly. The second most common cause of blindness worldwide is glaucoma. Glaucoma is a condition that gives you irreversible blindness. So if you are blind from glaucoma, you are blind from glaucoma. And there's nothing we can really do to get you to regain your sight. Glaucoma is what we call the silent thief of sight. And the reason why we call it the silent thief of sight is because you have no symptoms at the early stages. And when I'm saying glaucoma, I'm talking about the common type we have in Nigeria. There are other types of glaucoma, which is acute glaucoma, which you have symptoms when the eye becomes painful, but that's less than 1% of the population. So for the purpose of today's talk, when I say glaucoma, I'm referring to the common type we have in Nigeria. It's called the open angle glaucoma or the chronic glaucoma. Now, in that condition, what happens is the eye makes fluid and drains fluid. So there's production and there is drainage. Now, if the drainage is affected, then the fluid is produced and builds up in the eye. That pushes the pressure inside the eye up. And when the pressure is high, it damages the most fragile part of the inside of the eye, which is the optic nerve. That's the nerve that takes anything we see from the eye to the brain. So glaucoma is caused usually by problems with the outflow, with the drainage within the eye, which is the front of the eye. That's between the cornea and the colored part. But it manifests mostly at the back of the eye, and that is the optic nerve. And the optic nerve basically is what takes information from the eye to the brain. And like I said, you don't have symptoms, and it's called the silent thief of sight. In Nigeria, most people have lost the sight of one eye completely before they realize they have glaucoma. They might say, oh, I noticed that I keep on hitting the left side of my car, or I keep on bumping into people who are going by on the right side, or things that affect their peripheral vision. Because glaucoma affects the peripheral vision, and it's only in the end stage that affects the central vision. And by then, you've lost most of your vision. And the only way you can find out if you have glaucoma is to go and have an eye test. If there's any member of your family who has glaucoma, usually we say in the Black population, when you get to around the age of 30, all the children or the siblings of somebody who has glaucoma should get tested. In a European population, they might will advocate the age of 40. But in Black people, glaucoma is more aggressive and it doesn't respond to treatment like in the Europeans. Also here, we don't have a social security system that allows us to go for free eye tests. In the UK, for example, at certain stages in life, your eye tests are completely free. So they encourage people to go for eye tests. And we don't have that here. And don't forget, like I said, you need to go for an eye test before you can actually get a diagnosis of glaucoma. So early detection of glaucoma is very important. glaucoma causes irreversible blindness. So when you are treating it, we cannot reverse what you have lost. We can only stop it from getting worse. And I mentioned treatment. Yes, glaucoma can be treated, but it cannot be cured. So it doesn't mean that if they diagnose you as having glaucoma, you lose hope. No. You do your best to maintain what you have. And there are three ways in which we treat glaucoma generally. The first way is medication. The second way is laser treatment. And the third way is to have an operation. Now, it doesn't mean that we follow that sequence all the time, but I just want you to know that glaucoma can be treated, and you can have eye drops, sometimes tablets, but in extreme cases, because you can't use the tablets for a long time because of their side effects. You can be treated by laser, or you can be treated by having surgery. And like I said, in Africans, glaucoma is a more severe disease, and its response to treatment poorly compared to the Caucasians. So because of that, have an eye test now if you haven't had one recently. And depending on your age, either every year or every 2 years. So I'll go back to the refractive errors, and I'll just touch on that very briefly because I'm mindful of time. Now, refractive error basically means that you see something and you're not seeing it clearly. And what happens is when light gets into the eye, there are two aspects of the eye, two parts of the eye, which I had said is the anatomy, that focus the light. Now, the first part is the cornea, which is transparent, and it does 2/3 of the focusing of the light. And the lens in the eye, which we talked about cataract, does 1/3 of the focusing. And the cornea and the lens focus the eye on the retina. And Dr. Dina will talk much more about the retina. The retina is the nerve-sensitive tissue at the back of the eye, but she'll talk much more about that. So the types of refractive errors we have. Now, we all talk about being short-sighted, myopia. That means things close to us, we see it better than things far away. So your sight is better for short distances. We call that short-sightedness. And the opposite of that is long-sightedness, which means that things that are far away, you see them easier than things that are close to you. So short-sightedness and long-sightedness, those are the first two. Then astigmatism. Astigmatism basically is when you look at things, you see them, but they are not focused sharply on the retina. And that's due to the irregular curvature of the cornea, which is the front of the eye. So you see things, but it's a bit blurry. The lens itself, like I said, it does some work in refraction, can also give you some astigmatism, but astigmatism is mainly due to problems with the cornea. And the fourth one, which a lot of people talk about, is what you call presbyopia. When we all get to around the age of 40, we start having difficulty with seeing small print. We look for more light so we can see things better, or we make our arms go longer. We move things away from us to see things better because the eye strains to focus at things near us. And that happens to most people at the age of 40. Some people, it happens before 40, some people after 40. But essentially, the problem there is resolved by reading glasses. But we also want you to use it as an advantage. Take that as an advantage of having an eye test there and then. So that's the fourth one. So myopia, hypermetropia, astigmatism, and presbyopia. So like I said, presbyopia happens to most of us when we get to the age of 40 and we need reading glasses. And then we say, have your eye tested for other conditions when you do that. So if you could kindly take me to the next slide. Right, good. So I mentioned the cornea. The cornea is the front part of the eye, which is usually transparent. So nobody sees it, nobody talks about it. But if things blow onto your eye, they could hit your cornea and cause you a lot of discomfort and a lot of watering. The cornea has a lot of nerve fibers going there, but it doesn't have blood vessels. So anything that happens to the cornea could be quite painful. There are many, many conditions we have that could lead to corneal scars or corneal opacification. So when you have a problem with the cornea, it could go opaque. We could talk about trachoma, which is more common in the northern parts of Nigeria, where you have some scarring on the surface of the cornea and the eyelids turn in and they start rubbing on the cornea and the cornea becomes opaque. Unfortunately, we don't do a lot of corneal treatment or corneal work in Nigeria. We have a corneal bank for sight restoration, and that is the only bank in Nigeria that is completely empty. We don't have corneas in a corneal bank, and I can say that categorically because I'm a member of the board. So why don't we have corneas? Because the way you get corneas is from donation from people who have died. The corneas are taken immediately after death. So there must be, first of all, an agreement that the person would like his or her cornea donated to help somebody else see better. The person whose picture is on the extreme left, if he or she has a corneal graft, he or she will see much better. But we don't have that culture in Nigeria and a lot of places in Africa, because we all say, I want to go back to my maker complete just as I was born. So nobody wants to donate corneas. Even the one or two people who have said they want to donate corneas, upon death, the relatives say no. So that's one thing that we don't treat very well in Nigeria. The cornea, when it's harvested and when it's taken from somebody who's agreed to have it done, will need to be used within 3 to 4 weeks, depending on the medium you're storing it in. So, and it's something that should be harvested within a day. So if somebody dies and then 3-4 days later, they say, oh, let's donate the cornea, it's too late. So the second picture is somebody who has had a successful corneal graft. You can see the center is very clear. You can see the colored part of the eye, the iris, very clearly. And you can see the round pupil very clearly. This person has had a successful corneal graft. So it's important we try and get the message across that we could donate our corneas, and on our death, we help people who are blind to see better. Conjunctivitis, the last slide there, called Apollo in Nigeria. And why do we call it Apollo? There was an outbreak in the late 60s, which coincided with the same time we had this Apollo spaceship going up to the moon. Now, because it coincided with it and there was an outbreak, everybody thought, no, it must be from the moon. It must be due to this Apollo space shuttle and things like that. But it's actually a very, very contagious eye condition and called conjunctivitis. And it could spread very quickly. And everybody calls it Apollo in Nigeria. but it's called conjunctivitis. Now, there are various types of conjunctivitis, and just to touch on them briefly, there's conjunctivitis caused by bacteria, which we call bacterial conjunctivitis. And the third picture, the picture on the outermost right, is somebody with a very sticky eye, and it's red or pink. That's the typical picture you get from bacterial conjunctivitis. And people will say, I woke up this morning, my eyelids were stuck together, and I opened my eyes and there was a lot of discharge. That's usually bacterial conjunctivitis. You can have the viral conjunctivitis, which gives you a slightly different picture. The eye is more watery than sticky. The eye is pink as well. And you could sort of like find out the patient might have a runny nose as well, or a sore throat. And that's really the type of conjunctivitis that was initially described when people started using the word Apollo. You have allergic conjunctivitis if you're allergic to certain things. Some people are allergic to pollen. Some people are allergic to dust. Usually at the beginning of the rainy season in Nigeria, the rains go on the trees, they shake off a lot of dust on the trees, and people start getting eye allergies. In the UK, it's mostly due to pollen and starts usually in the spring, and people have allergic conjunctivitis, and the eye itches. We have also fungal keratitis, which is mainly in farming communities. You have a fungus getting into the eye, or you can have a chemical conjunctivitis when things splash on the eye. Now, we have so many bad habits in Nigeria. And sometimes when you have a conjunctivitis, they say, oh, you need to put urine on the eye. You need to put human or cow urine. People put engine oil on the eye. People put battery water on all sorts of things on the eye. Don't do that. Avoid all these harmful substances we put in our eyes. What we tell people sometimes is something splashes in the eye, you can wash it out initially with water, just water. You don't need anything else. And then seek help. The first port of call in Nigeria is the chemist. But most pharmacists know what to do when they have problems like this. But what I'd like to stress is we don't put all these substances in our eyes. Now, for the young people here, I was about to say ladies, but I didn't want to get Flora coming back to me after the talk. But for the young people who wear contact lenses, mainly females, I should say, they could have corneal problems. The contact lens is a very fine, thin plastic lens which we put on the cornea. If the contact lens is too tight, or if something gets trapped underneath the lens between the cornea and the lens, or if you get an infection, you could have corneal problems, a corneal infection. And if it's a very virulent organism, you can lose your cornea, lose your sight within 48 hours. So wearing contact lenses is somebody needs to take a lot of responsibility, and you must be disciplined. There are various types of lenses. Some you can wear in the morning, put them off, and throw them away. Some you can do that same routine, put it in the morning, take it off at night, and after a month, you replace the lens. Some you have what we call the extended wear, that you just leave it in for maybe a couple of months or 2-3 months. And those are really designed for people who might have problems taking it out. They have arthritis or they couldn't do anything and they need to wear contact lenses. So contact lenses, yes, they're good. But the worst thing to see is somebody who had no eye problems, wore fashion-colored contact lenses for an outing, and then develops an eye problem. I've had a bride who came to the clinic, bought contact lenses, and The day she left them in, the day of the wedding. And then I got a call the next day, emergency. And basically the contact lens had stuck on the surface of the eye. She couldn't take it out. She didn't know what to do. And the reason why she got contact lenses said, oh, I don't want to wear glasses and get married. So contact lenses, a lot of responsibility entailed there. You need to be taught how to put it in, how to take it out, and you have any problems, seek help. And finally, I'll talk about pterygium, which somebody asked about. A pterygium is a growth on the outer surface of the eye. Remember I said the white part of the eye is the conjunctiva. The conjunctiva bunches up and starts growing across the cornea. That's what we call a pterygium. So it starts going as if it's going towards the center of the eye, and it's on the surface of the eye. The main cause of pterygium is when you have a harsh environment. You have a harsh environment, it's very sandy, and you get a lot of eye irritation, and you develop a pterygium. Some pterygiums come to the edge of the cornea and stop. Some keep on growing. If it keeps on growing, we'll need to take it off by surgery, and then we hope it doesn't recur. And the reason why I said so, in the past, 70 to 80% of pterygiums or pterygia used to recur after they were taken off. But now we've developed quite a few techniques which we use to try and prevent it from regrowing. However, despite all this, when you have something in medicine that has so many different techniques or solutions, it just means we don't have the one that will work fully. So despite all this, you could still have a recurrence of the pterygium back onto the surface of the cornea. Now we talk about wearing protective glasses. Protective glasses will basically protect things from blowing on your eyes. In the days of massive Okadas everywhere, we used to have a lot of people coming in with foreign bodies on their cornea because they've been on an Okada and things have blown into their eyes. But that, thankfully, has cut down greatly within the last few years, especially where the Okadas have been banned. So we've spoken about problems on the surface of the eye, the conjunctiva, conjunctivitis, and pterygium. We've spoken about problems with the cornea, that's corneal scars, and hopefully if it gets that bad, we can get a corneal graft done. We've spoken about the lens in the eye, which is called the cataract. What we haven't spoken about is something called iritis or uveitis, where you have generalized inflammation in the eye. But I feel that it's something that if any questions come up, we could answer them, but we don't want to give you too much information that's difficult for you to digest, and basically focus on the main common things. So finally, on my last slide, I've said that if you have any eye condition, you must basically seek help, because not every condition has symptoms. If you suspect you have a condition, go for an eye test, and also go for regular eye tests. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Yileye. So because of time, we will take, I know there are quite a few questions for you, but we'll do that in the general Q&A. I just want Dr. Dina to talk about the back of the eye, and then we'll take all the questions together. So for those who were not here earlier, I did introduce Dr. Dina, but I'll just do it quickly again. Dr. Christiana Dina is a consultant ophthalmologist and medical retina specialist. She's the Director of Research and Innovation at London Northwest University Healthcare NHS Trust here in the UK. Christiana, over to you.
Thank you very much. It's not easy following Dr. Oyeleye, but I will do my best. No pressure.
No pressure.
Right, I'm just going to share my slides. Where are we? Oh, it says you've disabled sharing. Okay. Okay, got it. I take it everyone can see my slides?
Yeah.
Yeah, excellent. So yes, I'll just be focusing on the back of the eye as discussed by Dr. Oyeleye. And it's actually really helpful, a lot of what he's mentioned. And I just wanted to start by saying and reiterating that vision is the most valued sense by most people. I'm not just saying that because I'm an eye doctor, but this is evidence-based in the UK and across many other geographies. And so therefore, this session really is about trying to highlight the importance of looking out for specific, for your eyes really, and for any, and being able to spot when something is wrong and seeking help as quickly as you can. So your eye is similar to a camera, and Dr. Oyeleye has already gone through the anatomy, so I will be fairly quick, but just to note that the front of the eye is like a lens. You know, when your camera has got the lens at the front, and then it has the film at the back. And I know these days it's all very digital, but back in the day when we used to have to develop films, we all understood that there was a film at the back and then you've got the lens at the front. And at the front, when that lens is dusty, you know that the image you're going to get is going to be unclear. So people normally have lens wipers and so on to make that clear. But even if that lens is clear, the front is clear, if the film is damaged at the back, then the image developed isn't sharp enough, or isn't clear enough, or is actually just distorted, which means just twisted. So I'm going to be focusing on the retina, which is the film at the back of the eye, is equivalent to the film at the back of the eye. And I don't know, I hope you can see my cursor, which is basically my arrow on the slide. But if you can't, I'll just talk you through. You can see the camera itself, but right next to it, you can see this drawing of the eye. And you can see at the front, the cornea, which is transparent, and the lens, which is the oval shape, which is like green. But right at the back of that circle is the film. It's like a wallpaper that lines the back of the eye. And specifically, sort of near the center, there's a yellow area, like a tiny little yellow sort of oval area. And that is the macula. And the center of that is the fovea. And it's important to note that your retina contains specialized cells that help you to interpret your environment and capture your environment as visual images, which are then carried to the brain through your optic nerve for interpretation. And that's really important because once you understand that that's what those cells do, then you can understand what happens when something goes wrong with them. And the word resolution is also important because it helps us understand how we measure eyesight. And resolution is the ability to recognize minute details as separate images, separate image elements. So that's how it helps you be able to tell that, say, for instance, this lipstick, you can set, by looking at the image, you can tell that you can see one end of it and the other end of it, and that tells you where it starts and where it stops. But as we go smaller and smaller and smaller, you might not be able to, depending on your eyesight, you might not be able to tell the difference between where it starts and where it stops. And that's essentially the limit of your resolution. And when we measure eyesight, we're really trying to detect that. And that tells us how good someone's vision is and if something is causing a problem with your vision. That yellow part that I called the macula, at the center of it is the fovea. And the fovea is really important because it has the highest density of specialized cells that are called cones. And these cones help you, are the ones that help you with the highest sort of resolution. So they give you the sharpest central vision. And when you've got problems at the fovea, you tend to have significant problems being able to resolve small images. And depending on how bad things are, it can actually affect even bigger images as well. And just to tell you how important this area is, even though that macular area, that yellow area, only represents 2% of your entire retina, it actually it represents about 50% of the part of your brain that deals with your vision. So that tells you how important that specific area is. Now, moving on, when we look in your eye, if you've ever been to an optician or an eye care specialist, they typically look into your eye through your pupil, which is what Dr. Yella called an aperture. It's like a window into the back of your eye. And when we look into that, we can see this. This is the image we see. You can see the optic nerve, which is the yellow sort of object on the right. And then you can see the rest of the eye, which is essentially, we would call that the retina. The retina itself is transparent. What you're seeing reflecting back that yellow-orange is actually the choroid, which is blood vessels at the back of the eye. But essentially, you can see all the blood vessels coming out. You know, the optic nerve is essentially the center. You can see the blood vessels coming above and beneath. The darker red one are the veins, the retinal veins, which take blood away from the eye. And the thinner, less red ones are the arteries, which basically are the branches coming from your heart through your neck, then into the back of your eye. And they supply oxygen to your retina and keep your retinal cells healthy. And the big white circle there, which has E on it, is essentially your macula. And right in the center where you've got A is the fovea. And the fovea is the area that has the highest density of these cone cells, these specialized cells that are responsible for sharp central vision. And these days, at least since about 2004, 2003, we've had OCT scans, which basically are scans that allow us to look at this retina in a lot of fine detail. And we do these scans, it literally takes us less than 5 seconds. And right there, you can see this is the image that we get when you come to our clinic. And the valley you can see in the center is what is the fovea that I said, that central part. And you can see that it doesn't have as many layers as the rest of the retina. And that's to allow the light through the pupil to land on it and go straight to the brain where it's interpreted. And the other areas obviously have all the retinal cells or the axons, the nerve cells that make up your retina. And the important point to take away here is that your retina is made up of these layers, and these layers have to be exactly laid as they are here to allow you to see clearly. When you have liquid leaking into there because there are blood vessels in the center, or you have anything damaging or changing the structure of these layers, you will have a twisting or blurring of the image that you're trying to see. So essentially, again, this is just like a schematic, like a drawing, and just trying to highlight to you that the retina and the macula have blood vessels going through them, and they're also made, and there's nerve cells as well. And the blood vessels and the nerve cells need to work well together for you to be able to see clearly. And if the blood vessels are leaking or the nerve cells are damaged, the vision is impacted. And you might have all seen this sort of chart. This sort of chart you see when you go to your opticians, and the top letter Here we say 660, in America they say something else, but essentially the idea behind the letters is to be, you're able to see them when you're able to see where they start and where they stop, and that's that resolution that I was highlighting. And the smaller the letters are that you're able to see, the better your resolution is. But that's not all of vision. There's also your visual field, because like I said, the macula only represents about 2% of your retina, and the fovea has all these cone cells. But there's other cells called rod cells that help you to be able to see when the lighting is dim, that help you to be able to note motion, and that is happening beyond the center. And there's other ways of testing whether that's been, that's affected negatively. And one example is visual field test. However, there's many other tests of visual function. So visual function is not just the letters you can read or your visual field test. There's a lot of ways we check the health of your eye. So it's important that I highlight this, because sometimes you might go to your optician and they get you to read letters and they say, oh, your letters are fine, but you're aware that you're having different symptoms. It's important that that is taken seriously. And you might be able to say, look, are there other tests you can do to investigate why I'm not seeing so well? So just to go into symptoms that you might experience, visual blurring is one, and obviously it's very important because the eyes are there to see. When you're looking at the letter on the side, you can see that if you're like me and you're looking at those letters, they're not very clear. And that's because the vision is blurred. And when you notice that you're not seeing things as sharply as you used to, that's a reason to go and see your eye care practitioner. Distortion is another symptom. Distortion is when you look at a straight line or straight edge, and instead of things looking straight, they're looking curved or wavy. That's a really important symptom, because usually it's saying it's because the cells at the back of your eye are no longer in the position that they should be, either because of liquid or leaking or abnormal blood vessels. And so therefore, it's an important symptom for you to flag to your eye care practitioner to look at the back of your eye and to tell you what might be causing the problem. And sometimes you might not notice this because the problem might be happening in one eye and not the other. And usually the brain can compensate. So it's worthwhile sometimes just covering one eye to see what your vision looks like, and covering the other, see what the vision looks like. And if there's a problem, then you can see your eye practitioner. My dad, this is an interesting story. My dad didn't know for a very long time that his vision in one eye didn't develop as a child. So he's got what we call amblyopia. And he wasn't aware. He can drive, he can do all things, but he's just not someone who's ever closed one eye at one point to see what the other eye was doing. And when he did, he noticed that he actually couldn't see really well, went to the optician, and that's how he got his diagnosis. So it's not uncommon to not be aware that one eye is not doing well because the other eye is compensating. And other symptoms might include floaters. And this is when you might be aware of tiny black dots or white dots moving around in your eye. Some of my patients describe that as they feel like there's a fly and they're trying to catch it, but there's nothing there, because it's actually due to the gel at the back of your eye. Either maybe there's blood there or inflammation, or the gel itself starting to age and form little clumps. You can also have a scotoma. That's a medical word, and I don't know why I've put that there, because I normally I knew that this was going to be a lay audience. So scotoma is more like when you can see a patch in your vision, either a patch in your vision that is not very clear, or actually that you can't see out of completely. And that's also an important that you need to highlight to your eye care practitioner. A visual field defect, that is when, say for instance, you cover one eye and on one corner, or maybe below or above or next to it, there's an area that you can't see out of properly. Normally we do visual field tests in the hospital, but actually for some of my patients, particularly the ones who have what we call a retinal tear, so that's where this wallpaper has developed a bit of a tear in it, but it hasn't, maybe they're waiting for an operation, we normally would say to them, cover one eye and see if there's a patch coming into your vision that you can't see out of. That's urgent and we need to see you quickly. And then photophobia. Photophobia is when you're in daylight or sunlight, or when you move from sort of dimmer lighting to more bright light, your eye hurts. Or when you look at light, it hurts. It actually is like an ache and is directly related to light. And that's what we call photophobia. And it's an important symptom that you need to highlight to your eye care practitioner. And it usually indicates inflammation in the front or the back of the eye. Right, so this is a patient of the Macular Society. The Macular Society is a charity in the UK that looks after people with macular problems, so problems at the back of the eye. And he's got macular degeneration. And when he covers, one eye is mainly affected, both eyes are affected, but one eye particularly. And when he's an artist as well, so he drew what he could see looking through his bad eye. And you can see that he can't make out the nose, and you can see the mouth is a bit blurred. You can't really make out that detail. He's lost resolution. But then when you look at what he can see with both eyes, you can see that his brain has sort of completed the image for him because he's got better vision in the other eye. So that looks pretty okay. And I put this image there just to show you the difference that can happen. If you're just looking through your eyes, it's possible not to notice that one eye actually has got a problem. And oftentimes when people present to us, we say it's sudden awareness, not sudden onset. So you've suddenly become aware there's a problem, but it might have happened months ago, you just were not aware of it. So I'm just going to give you some examples of diseases that affect the back of the eye, literally 3. Diabetic retinopathy. So diabetes itself is a disease where the ability to control the blood sugar is faulty, and that leads to prolonged high levels of blood sugar for a long time, sustained. Insulin is the hormone that regulates blood sugar. It's like, how I explain to my patients is that it's a key that unlocks your cells and allows sugar in the blood to move into the cells so you can use it for energy. If you're not making enough insulin, the sugar stays in the blood and causes damage to your blood cells. In type 1 diabetes, the pancreas, which is what produces insulin, the organ in your body that produces insulin, is producing very little or no insulin. While type 2, there is usually, we call it insulin resistance. You might have insulin, but your cells are not responding well to it, or there's insufficient production of insulin. And type 2 diabetes particularly is a big problem globally now, really a global pandemic, because lifestyle actually sort of plays a part there in terms of being overweight and obesity, but also ethnicity is a risk factor. Certainly in the UK, amongst diabetics in the UK, Blacks and South Asians are at 2 times the risk, 2 to 3 times the risk of developing type 2 diabetes compared to white British people. And this is the global picture. There is predicted to be 51% increase globally by 2045 of people with diabetes. And with diabetes, currently there is 4.2 million deaths worldwide and 760 billion in healthcare expenditure. So this is a serious problem. And if you look at the prevalence by continent, Africa isn't doing too great, particularly in terms of what we're expecting in future, with a significant over 50% increase expected in Africa between now and 2045. Yeah, sorry, over 134% increase expected in Africa by 2045. Currently in 2021, 24 million people with diabetes. By 2045, 55 million expected. And diabetes affects all these organs in the body, but of course, today we're talking about the eyes. As Dr. Oye said, he already talked to you about cataracts and glaucoma, and diabetes increases the risk of this as well, but I'll be focusing on its effects at the back of the eye. And what it does, what the high sugar does, is that it affects the small blood vessels at the back of the eye, which we call capillaries, which are branches of the arteries, really tiny branches, it causes damage to the wall, which then starts to cause leakage of the fluid into those layers that I said have to be nice and tight. Then you end up with fluid separating the layers, and then that causes the image, the light coming through to be scattered, and things are blurred, and your resolution is worsened. It also damages the retinal nerve cells as well, causing thinning. So this is what the retina would look like when you're at the back of the eye of someone with significant diabetic maculopathy. And the maculopathy is when the diabetes affects the blood vessels at the center of the eye. And remember, when you looked at the original image, that was just nice and red, yellow, orangey. But now you can see all these yellow patches, which is where you've got lipid, which is like fat leaking out of the blood vessels into the retina. And that OCT I showed you earlier, which had a nice little valley, you can see there's no valley in this eye with diabetic macular edema. Instead, we've got these black regions. So what the yellow is pointing at, the yellow arrow is pointing at, is where there's a lot of leaking fluid, which has caused that layer to be wider than it should be. The red is where you've got an abnormal, red arrow, we've got an abnormal blood vessel outpouching because the wall is damaged. And then the blue is the white bit, which is pointing at the white bit, which is the fat that is leaking into the eye. Again, you can imagine light trying to go through that is blocked. So when you look at the retina, you can see that the layers are distorted. They're not the way they should be. So the vision will be impacted. And this is just an example of one of our patients. The red patch on the right, to my, let's see, this is my left. So I hope you can see that where I've said baseline. The red is the area of leaking. And we don't want it to get to the central circle, which is the fovea, which is where a lot of vision, the high acuity vision, high contrast vision will be impacted. So we've done some laser, and you can see 5 months later, a lot of that red is gone and the center is still preserved. So that's some of the treatments that happens. And the key thing to note here is that this patient, because the red is not quite at the center, may not be aware that they've got a problem, so may not have any symptoms, but you can see how close it is to the center. So suddenly they have a central problem, and then they need more treatment. So being able to see someone when you've got diabetes regularly, your eye practitioner would say, your center is now at risk. You can have some laser treatment, you have it, it goes away, and your central vision is preserved. And then there's other, apart from the center, diabetes affects the rest of your retina, which is we call the peripheral retina. And that has stages: mild, moderate, severe, very severe, non-proliferative diabetic retinopathy, and then can progress to what we call proliferative diabetic retinopathy. So all those other stages before you get to proliferative, we can see as clinicians, and we as eye care practitioners, and we can see, what we call blot hemorrhages. So all these little red dots that you're seeing and red patches you're seeing. We can see abnormal changes to the blood vessels. So we can predict using this that this eye is in danger, and then we talk to the patient about looking after their diabetes, their blood pressure, their cholesterol. All of this is to prevent loss of vision, because at these stages, the patient is not aware that there's a problem. However, when it progresses to proliferative diabetic retinopathy, they're still not aware, but we can tell that now this eye is very much at risk of complete visual loss potentially. So then we can do treatment, which usually would be laser, because if proliferative diabetic retinopathy is allowed to progress, you get bleeding, and you can even get detachment, which is where that retina, that film, that wallpaper peels off the back of the eye, and the eye can completely lose vision. In fact, in worst case scenarios, you can get abnormal blood vessels growing at the front of the eye, which causes high pressure and pain and complete blindness. So advanced proliferative diabetic retinopathy is nothing to joke with. So we like to pick it up. And this is an example where you've got all these wiggly blood vessels, which are very weak, and they can bleed easily and cause sudden loss of vision in terms of blurred vision, sudden blurring of the vision, or even, as I said, can lead to painful loss of vision and high pressure. So this is another patient where the proliferated diabetic retinopathy has bled, and you can see where the red arrow is pointing to. There's a lot of blood at the back of the eye. But at this stage, we can still laser it and hopefully save the eye, save the vision. However, at this stage, this is another patient, and they've presented very late, and the wallpaper that you've seen before, you can see it's lifted up, it's actually detached. And even the optic nerve, you can barely see it. So it's lifted up. And even though they have, and you can, this is the OCT of it, you can see that it's very thick in terms of the retina, and it's all distorted. You can barely make out any of the anatomy. And the patient has some surgery. We're able to save the retina and make it flat again, but their vision is permanently and irreversibly damaged. So now they can only see the very top letter at the on that eye chart. They can't see any more than that. And that's why we want to treat these eyes much earlier before they get to that stage, really before the patient starts to have symptoms. Another disease is sickle cell retinopathy. Sickle cell disease is a global public health issue. There's more than 300,000 babies born in Africa a year with sickle cell disease. And the care is still not where we need it to be. However, proliferative sickle cell retinopathy is the most common eye manifestation of sickle cell disease, and it can cause sight loss, irreversible sight loss it can cause. And the problem is that it has no symptoms until the advanced stages. So there's 5 stages of proliferative sickle cell retinopathy. Stage 1 and 2 and 3 have no symptoms, and at stage 3, when possible, we can do, when appropriate, we can do some laser to cause the abnormal blood vessels that grow at that stage to go away. But if it moves to stage 4, that's where you get a bleed. And once you have a bleed, sometimes it clears by itself, but oftentimes it doesn't. And then there's a need for an operation. And that even though the operations are much better than they used to be, sometimes we're not able to restore vision, particularly if you get a retinal detachment, which is stage 5. Even with the best of surgery, oftentimes the outcome is not as good as it could be. So really with sickle cell retinopathy, we want to catch these eyes at stage 3 and treat, or at least observe closely where possible, so that we don't get to stage 4 or stage 5. And there's not enough research in this area, and we've got a large research project starting at the end of the year to better understand how to treat eyes at stage 3 and maybe even prevent stage 1 and 2 from getting to stage 3, so that we can preserve vision in sickle retinopathy. I'm almost done. I know I'm running out of time. And this is an example of someone with stage 3 sickle retinopathy. They've had a dye test, which looks at the blood vessels at the back of the eye. And you can see the normal blood vessels where the dye is still within the blood vessels, which are the lines you can see. But then you can see at the edges, you've got this large white arcs. And that's where the abnormal blood vessels themselves are leaking. And at this stage, we can do some laser to stop that from bleeding. But at this stage, the patient has no symptom, so they're not aware. So that's why, again, it's important when you have something like diabetes or sickle cell retinopathy that you see an eye care practitioner regularly. Then age-related macular degeneration. This is a very big disease in the West, in the UK. We spend a lot of our time doing this. I'm told that there's not a lot of this in Africa in general, so I'm not going to pay a lot of focus to this. And actually, the few studies that have been done in Africa suggest the prevalence is little. However, there's a type of it, a variant of it, called idiopathic polypoidal choroidal vasculopathy. Very long name. Just say IPCV. That's what we all say. And essentially is a type of age-related macular degeneration, type 4, where you get abnormal grape-like lesions growing at the back of the eye, and they can bleed. And Oftentimes, hypertension can make this worse, and the bleeding, this is just a schematic, the bleeding can cause blurred vision or floaters. So again, quite important, when you get blurred vision or floaters that you get seen, if you have IPCV, there's treatment that can be done, and the sooner the better. Otherwise, you can have bigger bleeds that then require surgery and more invasive treatment. Other conditions that can affect the retina include trauma, infection, inflammation, things you're born with, congenital causes, deficiencies like lacking vitamin B12, vitamin A, cancer, and iatrogenic. I wanted to talk about iatrogenic, which is basically when you have a side effect of some sort of medical treatment, because hydroxychloroquine is something that I remember during the COVID pandemic, a lot of people were using to prevent, I think, either to prevent COVID or they thought it would prevent severe COVID, but they were getting it, particularly in Africa, they were getting it unprescribed, and high doses of hydroxychloroquine used over a prolonged period of time can cause irreversible damage to the center of the eye, whereby the vision does not come back to the macula. And I remember this because my parents obviously were offered hydroxychloroquine in doses and were told to use it for the 2-3 years, however long the pandemic lasted. And I blew a gasket because I was very much like, do not do that. There's no proof that this will prevent, and there's no evidence base. And also longer term, it can cause irreversible damage. So my key messaging, I'm sorry I've taken a lot of time, 4 points. Visual function is the most valued sense in most cultures and geographies, so we need to look after our eyes. We need to pay attention to our visual function, and the key symptoms include visual blurring, floaters, and distortion. We need to invest in routine eye health checks at least once in 2 years, and we need to promptly seek visual symptoms, review of our visual symptoms by a qualified eye care practitioner, because it can save your sight. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dr. Dina. Right, we have a lot of questions, but I'm going to give you a breather, Dr. Dina. I'm just going to do a quick announcement so you can get some water or something before you come back and have to take some of the questions. Let me just take you off spotlight so you can come on. All right, hope everybody is here and with us. Hope you're finding this very informative. Let me know in the chat. I just want to give the speakers, a 1 minute break or so. If you have a question and you haven't popped it in the chat, put it in the chat, or we'll ask you to raise your hands when it's time. I'm just going to do a quick announcement. Some of you might have heard about our new service at Encapsulate Healthcare. But if you haven't, I am telling you again now, we have a blood test service. This is for people who may be coming to the UK and do not have access to NHS services. So this is a blood test service. It's a paid service, a private service. And you'll be able to book appointments and get blood tests done. The other thing that we're doing also is medication reviews. But if you want more information about either service, please send us an email. The email is there on the flyer, encapsulatehealth@gmail.com. All righty. Thank you everyone for the show of love in the chat. Really good. Yeah, the speakers need to see that so they can come back next time if I want them to. Thank you all for the feedback. Thank you. Don't forget to complete the feedback form. I know you're giving me this feedback now, but more detailed feedback would be really great so we continue to improve. I'll pop the link in the chat again in a minute. All right, Bumi, questions, please. The ones from earlier on, and then we go in order.
Okay, let me just add the speakers to the spotlight and take you off. Okay.
Yeah.
So we've got a couple of questions. Just trying to open them. Apologies.
Can I say something quickly?
Yes.
Yes, please.
I just saw a question earlier. It's gone now. I don't know where it was, but someone was asking about being very short-sighted and having had cataract surgery. and then in one eye, and struggling with what we call anisometropia. So basically one eye hasn't had cataract surgery and the other one has, and they're finding it difficult to use their eyes together. And what can they do to fix this is what they said. And I was just going to say it's worthwhile going to see either your eye doctor or your eye optician, because contact lenses sometimes help with that. But also having cataract surgery in the other eye could help with that if that's required. In some scenarios here, we would do what you call clear lens exchange. I don't know if that's done in Nigeria. I have to ask Dr. Oyeleye. But sometimes you take out a lens that doesn't have a cataract because you're trying to match up the vision in the other eye. But contact lenses would be the simplest way if you can look after it and, you know, wash your hands and access it properly and all those things to make sure that you don't have the side effects that Dr. Oyeleye mentioned earlier.
Okay, so the first question is this. Good evening. I always have headaches whenever I pick up anything I have to read. What may be responsible? Thank you.
Was that the question from Joy?
That's correct. Joy Ike.
Yeah, because I made a comment. I made a comment in the chat box, just basically saying that if she's around the age of 40, it might be presbyopia she has, which is refractive error. And essentially, what happens then is that the eye is not comfortable seeing things that it used to do close up, and you strain more to focus on that, on things. So the initial reaction is to move things away from you. Like I said, your arms will get longer, or you look for brighter lights to try and see better. So it depends on what type of headache she has and also her age. Interestingly, very interestingly, most people develop presbyopia about the age of 40, but the Igbos in Nigeria are said to develop presbyopia earlier than the non-Igbos. So they get theirs mid-30s, late 30s. Very interesting thing.
Okay, that's interesting.
That is very interesting. I wonder why that is. Is there a difference in diet?
Well, there are many postulations.
Genetics, probably.
Okay. Yes, there are many postulations, but I mean, nobody has said this is definitely what it is for. What causes it?
Wow.
Okay. To the next question. I am 66. I sometimes have itchies on my eyes. I use glasses to read.
Itches, what is that?
Eye
Itchy
itchiness,
eyes, yeah.
the dryness, maybe.
Oh, okay. No,
Bumi,
itchy is.
hello, Bumi.
Yes.
Could I suggest something? All the difficult questions go to Dr. Dina. Just ask me this.
Do not do that.
That seems to be very easy. It's just a one-liner.
Yeah, Bubi, let me just say something. If you put a question in the chat and the speakers are asking more questions, please just raise your hand
Yes, you
so
can
we can
put your
unmute
hands up.
you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
that we can have the
sometimes when people
conversation.
talk. Yeah.
So separately, so
When people talk,
itching,
sometimes they can add more to it.
right. So I'm just thinking, if you've got itchy eyes, itchiness is one of the, I guess we could have put that as a symptom, is one of the cardinal, when I say typical eye symptoms, and it's typically linked to allergy. And typically, if you've got itching, you know, you're either reacting to pollen, dust, you know, it's basically histamine being let off and cool, and it's an allergic a response to an allergic stimulation, essentially. So typically, that we would say that it might be dust, it might be pollen, it might be in some scenarios it could be a type of dry eyes. Essentially, it's the surface of your eye. And normally I'd ask my patients or even family members to tell me about itching to see their optician, because they can look at your conjunctiva, which Dr. Abiola described, or Dr. Oyeleye described really elegantly earlier, as the film that covers the white of your eye, and that area also lines your lid, your upper lid and your lower lid, and we can look at that and it can tell us whether or not you've got various types of allergic conjunctivitis and what drops are best to be prescribed. But even before you get to that, I would say initially try dry eye drops, try and use the ones without preservatives so that you don't cause an additional issue whilst you're trying to solve one. And if that doesn't help, I'd go to see your chemist or optometrist, get them to have a look, and they can prescribe something like, I'm not prescribing, this is not a prescribing place, but just a suggestion that, drops like sodium chromoglycate and things like that address allergy. But you should see your optometrist or your chemist for specific prescriptions based on your own specific eye symptoms and examination.
Somebody else asked a question about their child waking up every morning, itchy eyes and sneezing. And that again is the same thing we're talking about, an allergic thing. And the first thing I'd want to say is that, do you know any trigger factors or known allergies that your child has? Sometimes if it's allergy, we might say, do you have a carpet or a rug in the room? Or how frequently do you clean the curtains or dry clean the curtains in your room? Things like that. So the important thing is, first of all, to see if they can identify what is causing this. But when you have itchy eyes, runny nose, sometimes skin problems as well, and asthma, they're all usually due to allergy.
Okay, thank you so much for both. Now to the next question. I am short-sighted and I've been using glasses for over 40 years now. However, I have issues with driving at nighttime. I've learned one can use night glasses, asking if this is available and okay for short-sighted persons like me.
Dr. Oyeloye.
Right, okay. So problems with driving at night are usually due to glare, okay? And glare essentially, if he or she, or he, I think, wears glasses, first of all, you can have an anti-glare or an anti-reflective coating on your glasses. That's number one. Number two, we have sometimes a certain tint on the glasses, which they say is good for night driving, which is an amber tint. But, however, I mean, what this person probably needs to do is to have an eye test, because it could be that the person is developing cataracts. And some certain types of cataracts, glare is the main symptom they have. So we shouldn't assume that you could just fix it by sorting out glasses or tints or things like that. This is an opportunity to have an eye test. And when you have the eye test, do a thorough test. Ask them to check for glaucoma, and in your case as well, to check for cataracts.
Okay, thank you so much.
Astigmatism as well.
Yeah, that's right.
Because that can also worsen. So definitely see someone to look at get your glasses right.
Thank you. The next question is, how do I treat eye floaters and block the development of cataract?
Right. I guess I'll
back of the eye.
Yeah. So let me just say that the longer I've been a consultant, the more conservative I've become. So when I was training, I was very keen to operate. Now I'm more, do people, really thinking, less is more, first do no harm, those sorts of things. With floaters are irritating. Like I said earlier, it's like you're grabbing for a fly and it's not there. But what I say to my patients all the time is that for most people, the brain learns to deal with it and takes it out of the picture. So you stop becoming aware of it. If you're looking for the floater, you'll find it, but it stops being an interference over time. And that can take more time for some people than others. And I agree that there is a small group of people that this really is a problem for. And the reason I'm stressing this is that some people do offer an operation for floaters where they go to the back of the eye and they remove the gel. And I have seen people where that's successful, but every operation has its risks and benefits, including infection. When you get your gel taken out, which is what we call a vitrectomy, it usually results in you developing cataracts quicker within the next couple of years. There's a risk of a retinal detachment. It's low, but it's there. There are other associated risks with this. So I would say that, first of all, see if you can live with it. Then if you can't, the only treatment, sadly, is a vitrectomy, which is an operation. Then in terms of preventing cataracts, there really isn't any medical way of preventing it. The ways of maintaining your eye health to delay, like Dr. Leah said earlier, we're all praying that one day we'll be old enough to get cataracts. Hopefully it'll be 100 or 110 there. But however long it takes, what you want to be able to do is eat healthy, protect your eyes from unnecessary sun damage, wear sunglasses when you're, in the sun and so on. And that means that hopefully what happens is when you do develop cataracts, you're developing it at a very, very ripe old age. And at that point, like Dr. Ilea said, cataract surgery is one of the most, well, firstly in the UK is the most performed operation that we do and is the most successful operation that we do. And I suspect that's probably global data as well. So it's not something to be afraid of. It takes 8 to 10 minutes. It's not a problem at all. You just want to look after yourself and look after your eyes so that you develop it as late as possible. That's what I'd advise.
Thank you so much. The next question is from Nika. Nika, I've asked you to unmute yourself. Oh, thank you.
Thank you. So basically, one of my eyes is bulging, and I tried to take my glasses off. I have had an MRI scan, and it came back saying something about my thyroid. But my thyroids are now back to normal, but the bulginess in my eyes is still there. I take my glasses off. Does that make sense?
I can't see you, but that makes sense.
Oh, you
Okay,
can't
now
see
I
me?
can see you.
Oh, my camera's on.
Oh, now I
Yeah.
can see you.
Just hold on. Yep, that's it.
Yes. Oh, wow. Yeah, I can see it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I'm not really sure how it can be treated. I do have an appointment I've been waiting ages for. I just wonder if you had any suggestions as to what I can do.
Should I say something quickly?
Yes.
Firstly, thyroid eye disease is not my expertise, but I'm an ophthalmologist, so I do see a lot within my department. I will say that normally what you've got is what it looks like. Firstly, this is not a diagnosis. We're on a webinar, but what it looks like is exophthalmos, which is where the orbit sort of bulges out a little bit. And that is a side effect or consequence of hyperthyroidism, usually.
That's correct.
Where it's high. And typically the problem with that is your eyelids, the eye bulges, but you probably don't pay attention, and most people don't. Your eyelid rests in such a way that you can't see the white of the eye. Usually it should just land just over your cornea. But when your eye bulges out a little bit, you can see it. So the eye is exposed. And that's a problem because it causes dryness and can cause double vision, because thyroid eye disease also affects the muscles around the eye. And also it's unsightly. Now, what typically happens is that the thyroid is treated, as you've had, with carbimazole or other treatments. And then once that's under control, oftentimes, not all the time, the eye symptoms recede. But if they don't, then you will need what we call, there's various sort of surgeries that are done to address what we call the chronic stage of thyroid eye disease. So there's the acute stage when everything is high and there's a lot of inflammatory cells moving around and so on. And in that stage, typically we're focusing on calming things down. Sometimes you even have to use steroids and so on. But it's once the acute stage is over and you get into the chronic stage where there's now fibrosis and so on, and things are calm and it's not a hot eye, then a surgeon can then go in, do some measurements and correct that with lead surgery, orbital surgery, and various other tools and methods to try to get you back to where you were. But initially, they will focus on the systemic control of the thyroid eye disease, focus on any inflammation, address all of that, and then lastly, focus on getting the symptoms, the chronic symptoms back under control. I hope that's helpful.
Very helpful. Thank you very much.
So you should
Thank
be
you.
expecting an appointment with an eye doctor, is that correct?
That's correct. I've just been waiting since December though.
Yeah, there's not many oculoplastic surgeons in the UK, and the backlog, you sound like you're in the UK, am I correct?
Yes, I am.
Exactly. So the backlog is significant, but that's what likely they will do when they see you. They will do a questionnaire to see how this is affecting you, do some eye measurements and so on, and then talk to you about the potential treatments.
Thank you so much.
Not a problem.
Thank you so much for that. The next person I'm going to call on is Henry Oni. Henry?
It's blurry. No, my background is blurry. It's not your eyes.
Now that we're talking about eyes. Okay. Henry Oni, if you can unmute yourself, please. Otherwise, I'll just read out his question. I have a vision impairment with a 7.5 prescription for both of my eyes. However, in 2019, I underwent a phacoemulsification procedure to treat cataract in my right eye. As a result, my right eye has become long-sighted with a retraction of around plus 0.35. This difference in refractive error has caused me to experience double vision at times. I'm in my mid-40s. How do I fix this double vision and the wide difference in retraction?
Okay, I think it's refraction, not retraction, but it's similar to what Dr. Dina had answered before. There's a big difference between the prescription in both eyes. So each eye is seen a separate image. One image is larger than the other, and the brain is having problems in fusing them together. So the options which had been mentioned before, if the other eye has a cataract, you can have that cataract surgery done. Sometimes we do surgery when there's no cataract to balance things like this, but the least or the minimally non-invasive technique you could do is to get contact lenses to balance things up. But it's something that they'll need to see him, assess the state of the eyes, the ones that have had cataract or that has had cataract surgery, the other one, and see what exactly is the easiest and most straightforward. I mean, by and large, if you try contact lenses and they don't help, you can still go back and do cataract surgery.
Okay, is that okay, or would you like to add anything, Dr. Christiana D? Okay.
Perfect.
All right, we'll move on to the next one. So, Techno CK, I've asked you to unmute yourself. Okay, this person has actually left. So, please, lately I discovered that I strain my eyes to see things, especially at night, and I end up having severe headaches that lingers. And I tend to feel this headache when I read for a short or long period of time. I've been trying not to experience double vision at times. And I've been trying to get wrong advice. Sorry, this person, I think is all muddled up. I've been trying to get wrong advice and medication. Please, what should I do? I think the long and the short of it is that they strain their eyes at night and they are having severe headaches. What should they do?
See the optician.
Okay. Fatima, are you here? Okay. My son suffers from serious eye allergy. I think you've mentioned, you've already answered that one. Yes. So we go back into the chats. And I will be calling out names. Please, if you're here, kindly just unmute yourself Gloria or iPhone? iPhone, if you're here, please unmute yourself. And you have asked the question. Okay, I'm going to read this one. I have a kind of growth in my...
No.
Okay, I think Bumi's network is gone. So let me just pick up the question. 1 second, let me just find the question, the next question. Please make sure you keep yourself muted unless you're called upon. Thank you. All right, okay, so scrolling up, we've got lots of questions. I have a kind of growth in my eye. It's a little and triangular growth at the corner of my eyes. It doesn't disturb me, but the optician I met said it will keep growing till I can't see again. He said it's caused by dust and the sun. But any advice about this? I already use glasses. I don't know what that could be.
Dr. Ile already talked about that earlier.
Okay, so
What's
is
like
there
the pterygium?
Yeah.
Pterygium, yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't pronounce it. I wanted you to say it. And then the next question is, what is the best treatment option for that condition you just mentioned? That was the next question.
Well, it depends on how close to the center it's grown. Initially, the symptoms of pterygia are a bit of eye discomfort, dryness on the eye. Basically, what happens, it gets to a certain stage whereby the tear film is interrupted by this growth. So your tears don't stay on the eye as long as they should. So you get discomfort, you get dryness. The eyes could go red on and off and things like that. So the initial treatment is basically eye drops to keep the eye well lubricated. And if it becomes more and more of a problem, then he or she may require surgery.
Okay, all righty. Okay, so Josephine, are you online? Do you want to ask your question? You can unmute yourself, Josephine. Are you still on with us?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Ask your question. You put it in the chat earlier on. Go for it.
Yeah, I was asking, I observed that my eyes are going smaller. Look smaller.
Okay, and what is the question?
That's the question. The eyeballs, or touching the lid, you can't even, I feel that the eyes are getting smaller.
Okay.
Okay.
I wonder, so that's something I've heard quite a few of our patients say, and it really depends. Again, you have to see an eye practitioner, but common reasons why you feel an eye is getting smaller or both eyes are getting smaller would be because, sorry?
Both eyes.
Both eyes would be because the lid is drooping. And when your eyelids droop, the eyes look smaller. So again, you would need someone to assess your lids. And there are many reasons why your eyelids can droop. Most commonly, it's age-related. As we get older, the muscles sort of weaken and sort of pull down a little bit. So then the lids go smaller, go lower. But then there are other reasons why you can have that. So that can be one reason why. Is there someone saying something? Right, so that can be one reason why your eyelids, your eyes look smaller. In terms of other reasons why your eyes might look smaller, sometimes, but this you would be more aware of, if someone's got not a lot of fluid in the eye, a condition we call hypotony, then the eyes again are smaller. But normally that's not something that just happens for no reason. It's there for various reasons. Maybe you've had eye surgery in the past, maybe you've got you've had trauma, but that's unlikely in both eyes, so that's why I say you would need to be looked at. But I suspect, without seeing you and knowing your story, I suspect it might be that the lids are getting more droopy and so therefore the eyes are looking smaller. And the options for droopy lids usually would be surgery to lift them up a little bit.
Okay, thank you for that. Before we carry on with the questions, I forgot one important announcement with regarding one of our key partners, Victory Drugs. Victory Drugs is based in Lagos, in the Festac area of Lagos, and they offer vaccination services through their Victory Vaccine Clinic, and they also offer the service of medication reviews, although in Nigeria they call them medication use review. I'll put their contact details in the chat, and if you would like to avail yourself of their services, then you can contact them on that number. Next question was from Dennis. Dennis, are you here? If you are, then please unmute yourself. If not, I'll go straight to your question. I just want this to be a bit more interactive. That's why I'm asking you to speak. All right, I don't think I can, Dennis is here, but I'll ask anyway. He said he cannot see tiny letters, but I think you touched on that earlier on, but for the benefit of those who might have just joined, what can he do? He has problems seeing tiny letters. Is that the front or back of the eye or both?
Most likely it's what you discussed, the refractive error. So as you said, maybe the person came in late. The first port of call is having an eye test. And then based on that, they'll look at the eyes and see if you don't have any other problem. And then if glasses alone will sort this out.
Okay, great, thank you. Next question is from Happiness. Are you on? You can unmute yourself and ask your question, please. Happiness Michael Onuha. We've asked you to unmute. All right, Bumi, is the person online? If not, I'll just go to the next person. All right, Alabode, do you want to unmute yourself and ask the question you just popped in the chat, please? Thank you.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Thank you so much, our doctors. We really, really appreciate you. So I observed that there's a proliferation of herbal medicine in Nigeria as regards the eye. In fact, sometimes when you go on Facebook, that's the first thing you see. Oh, I took it took away cataract. I drank these and my eyes are now good. You know, the advertisements are always there. What is your advice for us on these things? And then the eye supplements that are being advertised, there are some in fanciful packages, some are even sold in sometimes in supermarkets and medicine stores. Do they really work? How reliable are those supplements? Thank you.
Dr. Ile.
I'll try not to sound too negative.
Please say it as it is and how it needs to be heard. Thank you.
We have a lot of claims as to a lot of herbal medicine, not just related to the eyes, but all over the body. Now, and those who claim it, they say, oh, medicines were developed from herbs anyway, so that's why they claim that, they work. In relationship to the eyes, a lot of these things, the important thing before you can give somebody something as medication, you want to have tested it and found out that, first of all, it's effective. And secondly, you want to know the side effects, so it's not harmful to people. And you want to be able to give it in certain dosages. A lot of this herbal medication, you don't know the dose, you don't know what's in the bottle, you don't know what things are there. And they just say, oh, it works, and you should use it. I personally, this is a personal thing now, I'm very much against people peddling this herbal medication. I was on a radio program before, this was a few years ago, and somebody says, oh, I hear Indian hemp lowers the pressure in the eye. Can I use it to treat glaucoma? And, yes, Indian hemp lowers the pressure, but then you won't say, yeah, I mean, take 3 or 4 joints every day. And you won't do that. So they might just say, this is from this tree or something, and they say it works and everything. But I'll sort of say, in terms of the herbal supplements, they don't really work as well as they're said to work. I mean, there's now I don't want to say all of them don't work. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying there are so many out there that you really don't know the ones that work and the ones that don't work. Now, vitamins, we've mentioned vitamins. Like sometimes we prescribe vitamins to keep the eye healthy, which have been proven to work in some conditions, but it doesn't mean they work in all conditions. Like there's a condition which Dr. Dino spoke about, the age-related macular degeneration. And in certain types of macular degeneration, there have been some supplements that work in certain types. But now what we have is we have them being prescribed for everything, including itchy eyes and all. So we sort of sometimes do polypharmacy in Nigeria. If you go to the average elderly person's home in Nigeria, they could bring out 10, 12, 15 vitamins. I once had a lady who came with about 12, 13 different vitamin bottles. And when I looked through there, was even one for children. And I said, look, why are you using this? I said, they said it would make me feel like a child. I'll be back to normal and everything. So I think we really need to look beyond the marketing gimmicks, okay, and find out that, the ones that could be useful to us. Now, in terms of the eyes, there are some certain things we look at when we're looking at the vitamins, is those that contain some certain ingredients, lutein, zeaxanthin, and there's 3 or 4 ingredients that we know help the eye. And it also depends on the concentration they're given. But it's not that we want everybody to use them. Sometimes some people are given, for example, medication for glaucoma. And when they run out of their treatment for glaucoma, they just depend on supplements, thinking the supplements will help. And they just needlessly go blind. So we need to be careful about prescribing and consuming a lot of the supplements. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that, sir. The next person is Happiness. I've asked you to unmute yourself. I think now you should be able to.
I think he mentioned it's in a noisy place, so let's just read his question.
Oh, okay, so let me just read what Happiness has written. A job where I work with data every day. I have to stare on the computer from morning 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. I noticed my eyes are now blurry and I can barely see my figures well. Where does this have a future problem for me if I continue to use the computer like this for a very long time? I can leave the job as I do. I can leave the job as I do not want to go blind, please. Thank you.
I like that very much. I like that you're taking your eye health very seriously. But in terms of eye health and screens, that you raised a very important point. The world these days, most of us are on screens all the time, and we do get eye strain from over focusing. If you notice when you use a screen, for instance, you don't blink as much. So then your eyes dry out more often. And then also, because of the intense focus, you put strains on your eye muscles, and then things can start to get blurred, or you can even get a bit of double vision. So what we normally advise is that you keep the screen at least 20, arm's length away for about 20 centimeters or more away from you, that the font size is big enough that you're not having to strain, and that you focus for, say, 20 seconds and break your focus and then focus again. Ultimately, I think the issue with leaving a job because of screen time is that many jobs and maybe most jobs have screen time as part and parcel of it. So it's really, how can we create or use our time in a way that we're not constantly focused on the screen perpetually. And a lot of occupational health, and I'm not sure what country you're in, but in the UK, a lot of occupational health teams, this is part of a lot of what they do, sort of supporting eye health with screens, giving you advice on distance, font size, time breaks, having regular breaks away from screens and things like that to ensure that you protect your eyes. You're not, there's these things, the devices won't make you go blind. And by blind, I'm talking black, like you can't see or you need a white stick. No, but it can cause stress and distress and difficulties focusing and cause strain and headaches and blurred vision and all those sort of things. And these are things that affect your quality of life and even the quality of your work. So you've got to learn how to use devices with your eye health as a priority. And I don't know if where you work, they've got a team that can support you with that. Otherwise, I think that, well, you can take some of the advice I've given, but also you can, maybe there might be resources we can point you to offline that will sort of break down some of the measures you can take to protect your eye health.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you. The next person is Fatima. Fatima, do you want to unmute yourself? But I think also that our question was just in line with what you've just said. And it's, what steps can we take to protect our eyes when using devices extensively? Are there any specific exercises or practices that can help strengthen and maintain the muscles of the eye?
There are exercises, and we have orthoptists that normally give you those advice. And in fact, some optometrists do. And people talk about the 20-20-20 rule. So, you know, after, I guess, 20 minutes, you look away for about 20 seconds before you look back. Make sure, like I said, distance away, and you know, give your eyes a break, essentially. Put in a break when you're using these things. There are various exercises that orthoptists and optometrists can recommend. And I will suggest, if you're struggling, definitely to see one so they can go through those exercises with you to strengthen your eye muscles.
Thank you. I think Fatima had another question earlier about the sun. Fatima, could you unmute yourself so that you can ask that one, please? I'll ask you to unmute.
Thank you. Thank you, to Oyele and Dr. Dina, for a wonderful session. It's been really insightful, very informative, and very clear. I know you mentioned wearing sunglasses when we're in the sun, but in Nigeria, you have all sorts, different types. Is there any particular recommendation, or can we just buy anything off the shelf, use anything we find available in the market?
Dr. It's specific to Nigeria.
Right. Theoretically, and that's the first thing I'll say, you ask for sunglasses that are protective against ultraviolet radiation.
Yeah.
Now, some people will say, oh, this one is for ultraviolet A, this one is for ultraviolet B. Just ask for sunglasses that, and the trick is that sometimes on the packets of the sunglasses, they'll actually advertise if they are protected against ultraviolet radiation. However, most people just get sunglasses. And the fact that they have sunglasses, it protects, first of all, it reduces the amount of light getting into the eye, and also things blowing into their eye. I remember when I was doing my exams, my final postgraduate exams, they said the richest man in the world says, I can give all the money I have to make sure I don't get cataracts. What advice would you give him or her? So at the end of the day, sunlight It's good to protect against it, but it's one of the known factors of developing cataracts. So if your profession is, or your job is mainly outdoors, then I'll say yes, invest in sunlight. If you're someone who's indoors all the time, you need the sun for vitamin D. So you don't really need to wear your sunglasses if you're only spending 5, 10, 20 minutes outdoors every day. So get sunglasses, but if you want to go for the more specific ones, look for those that are said to be protective against ultraviolet radiation.
Yeah.
All right. Christina, you wanted to say something? Did you want to add to that?
I was saying brilliant.
All right, fantastic. Another question that came up. Why? So you've mentioned about cataract in old age, but why would someone maybe after 40s, between 40 and 50 or earlier, younger age, have cataracts?
Okay, so some people are actually born with cataracts. That's the first thing I'll say. And we call them congenital cataracts. It might be that there was some issue, maternal illness during pregnancy, usually the first trimester of pregnancy, when ladies may not even know they're pregnant. It might be due to some medication they use or the mothers use during pregnancy. Or it might be that they've acquired the gene a gene that runs in the family that gives congenital cataracts. As we get older, we find out that even young children and teenagers and people in their 20s also get cataracts. So cataracts is not strictly speaking only related to the elderly, even though I stressed at the beginning that when you're getting old, it's to be expected. The reason why I stressed that was because people are looking for the cure for cataracts all the time. They're 60, they're 70, they're 80, they don't want to get cataracts. So that's why I stressed that. Now, going back to the younger ones, sometimes you can have a systemic condition, a medical condition within your body that could predispose you to having cataracts. Sometimes it might be, like I said, the medication we take that has caused this. Sometimes it might be due to injury that we've had along the line, some trauma. Sometimes people have an injury and they don't develop cataracts straight away. I've recently had a gentleman who had an injury to the eye and developed cataracts about 15, 20 years after the injury. And on trying to operate, we saw that the cataracts was just one of the problems he had in the eye. There were more extensive problems. So trauma is another factor. I think what I've mentioned so far, have I mentioned medication that we use? There are some types of medication that make people prone to have cataracts at an earlier age. So that's another one. So yes, we can get cataracts at earlier ages, but I mean, there are solutions to it. Now, there's something that, sorry, could I just go on? There's something, when Dr. Dina spoke, she said, given the results of cataract surgery in developed countries being 95 to 98%, and in Nigeria, it's much less. And I'll tell you why. They are what we call the traditional couches. That's those people who are traditional cataract surgeons. They carry out a procedure called couching. Basically, what they do is that they push a blunt stick forcefully onto the eye, and it pushes the cataract or pushes the lens out of the normal position. So the lens goes to the back of the eye. And because the cataract was blocking the light rays from the cornea to the back of the eye, that has tumbled out. They now see more light, and they say the cataract surgery has been cured. But most of the time, they develop other eye problems with time. They might get an inflammatory reaction. They might get retinal detachments. Now, the Blindness National Survey of Nigeria between 2005 and 2007 took all these types of surgery, including the couching I've said, into consideration. And that's why if you look at the figures of successful cataract surgery in Nigeria, they'll say 40 to 50% in the books, because you have a lot of people going for this couching, not only in rural areas. We have some near the main teaching hospitals in urban areas. So you have the couches everywhere, and people are still going to them. And having the surgery done, the type of surgery that was done before Christ is still being done now in Nigeria. And we're surprised we're getting bad results. So that's another thing. We need to know where we're going and go to the appropriate practitioner who will give you the proper advice and carry out the procedures if and when necessary. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for that. We've got a last question now. Someone's still coming in. Ofo Egu, if you can just unmute yourself, please. Yes.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for your selfless efforts. I joined very late due to some circumstances. I don't know if my question was touched, but the question is that if someone who is diabetic and has been using glasses for years is having problem with the vision. Okay, let me be more specific. I'm diabetic and I've been having problem with my vision. I went to an optical clinic and I was told that I have to walk and bring my sugar down to 6.7 before they can recommend new glasses for me. So I want to find out how well that is true. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'll take that. Just to say that as you said, you probably missed the session, but diabetes does damage the blood vessels at the back of the eye and causes leakage, something we call diabetic maculopathy, and which causes the vision to be blurred. On top of that, it can cause other problems in the eye. So they're correct to tell you to get your diabetes under control. That's absolutely right. But not just your diabetes, the blood pressure, the cholesterol, those are all factors that help you maintain your eye health, as well as the health of the rest of your body from diabetes. However, what I'm not clear on is when they examined you, did they find any problems caused by the diabetes, whether cataracts or maculopathy or lipids at the back or whatever? Because normally what I would say in those scenarios is depending on what they found, some of it needs treatment sooner than later. And the treatment is directed at the eye. At the same time, you're monitoring and managing your diabetes and your blood pressure and so on. So the example I like to use for my patients is, imagine you have a house that's being flooded. If that house is being flooded because there's a leaking tap, you can either do something to turn off the tap, or maybe for whatever reason you can't find any way to turn it off, or you can maybe get a towel to block the mouthpiece. A lot of the treatments we do for the eye is essentially that. You're putting a towel in, to stop the leakage. But once you remove your arm, the flood continues. So to turn off the tap, you really want to address the underlying factors, blood pressure, diabetes, cholesterol, and so on. But many times, and again, it depends on how far gone things are and so on, you need to do both at the same time. So what I would suggest, my advice would be to go back to see an eye doctor. So I assume an optical clinic is an optometrist. I would say go and see an ophthalmologist, get them to examine the front of your eye and the back of your eye and tell you how they've been impacted by diabetes. Of course, take on the advice that you need to look after your diabetes, your blood pressure, and your cholesterol, but also ask if you need treatment specifically for either your front, which is like maybe the cataract, or the back, which is the retina. Do you need laser? Do you need injections? And so on. I think it's really important that you are empowered with that information.
All right, thank you, Dr. Dina. All right, I think there was one final question, and that would be the final question for this evening.
Excellent.
Let me just bring it up. It's disappeared now.
I think I've got it. Is it a Tokumbo question?
Yes.
Okay. So the question says that, I think, yeah, so many messages. Okay, yeah. What is the recommended surgery for a 60-plus-year-old? Laser or traditional surgery? Is couching the same as the laser?
I think, Tokumba, you need to unmute yourself and bring some clarity to that question. Surgery for what? What's the condition?
You can unmute yourself now.
I think that the person is talking about cataract surgery, actually. And I think
Yes.
Dr. Abiola.
Oh, okay. The person has
explaining that.
unmuted. Yeah.
Great.
Do you want to ask your question, please, and bring clarity? Thank you.
Yes. I'm asking about cataract surgery.
Okay.
I'm a 57-year-old, and I've been told I have cataracts, and I'm really confused about whether to do the much easier laser one that you come out the same day, or go for the more traditional one where there's a bit of hospitalization. So I really don't know what's best for me at this stage.
How old did you say you are?
67.
Okay. Okay. Let me just explain, because you had used the word laser before. Now, right. Basically, there are various types of cataract surgery. Now, the cataract surgery called phacoemulsification, which is actually an ultrasound probe that is used, which we call laser in Nigeria. No matter what happens, it's always called laser, even though it is not laser surgery, it's an ultrasound probe is used. And it's type of surgery you'll get if you go to the UK, other parts of Europe and the US. It's the standard surgery they'll give you, the ultrasound, and it's done through a very, very tiny incision, 2 millimeters or so. And an ultrasound probe is put in the eye, which will help take the cataract out. And then the lens, which is folded, is inserted into the eye to replace the cataract you've taken. That is what I think you are describing as laser treatment, which we all call laser treatment in Nigeria, but it's not laser treatment. Now, that is what you get if you go out of the country. It's the latest technique of cataract surgery. The eye settles very quickly, and the eye is not really affected a lot by this surgery. So people have the surgery done on a Friday, and they're back to work on Monday, and they need drops for about a month, and it's settled. You go home the same day after surgery is what you refer to. The next one is what we call the small incision cataract surgery, or people call it the standard cataract surgery. And it's offered in Nigeria and other developing countries. In Nigeria, you probably get offered both the phacoemulsification and small incision cataract surgery. one is much more expensive than the other. The phacoemulsification is much more expensive than the other. So the small incision cataract surgery, basically you make an incision which is much bigger than this. We call it small. The phaco one, we call it micro. So we're talking about an incision that's about 2 millimeters to one that could be between 8 and 10 millimeters. Sometimes you don't need sutures for the small incision, but a lot of times practitioners put sutures in when they do the surgery. But you can also go home that day. So you don't really need hospitalization. Nowadays, most people do day case cataract surgery. Patients like to stay at home, except if obviously they've traveled a long distance for surgery, because they'll need to be reviewed shortly after the surgery. So like I said, that also gives good results, okay? It takes longer to settle. You can have more post-operative issues like what we call astigmatism, when you see things after and they're not very sharp. And like I said, you need medication for 2 to 3 months, after which, if it's settled, then you stop the medication. Another one is, which is going out of fashion, is called the ECCE, okay, which is an extra. Basically, what happens, you have an even bigger incision on the surface of the eye, and that one definitely you need to put sutures in, and it also takes another 3 months to settle. The type of surgery where they don't put lenses in, that has gone out of fashion. We used to call that intracapsular. That's gone out of fashion. And then the one I described that as couching is the one that I said was done in the times before Christ. And there's no reason why you're having couching in the 21st century, not even in the 20th or 19th century. That's all gone now. So couching, basically, it's done by the local, they have names for them, but let me just say traditional surgeons. And they push a blunt instrument on the eye very forcibly for it to dislodge the cataract. And that tumbles into the vitreous, that's the back of the eye. And sometimes, like I said, they get a lot of problems from that. So there's quite a variety of ways you do cataract surgery, but by and large, a lot of them are selected based on what one can afford, because not everybody has the same economic power as other people. I think in the UK, the NHS, you get the same standard free, but in Nigeria, you'd have to pay out of pocket for this, except you have an insurance plan. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, please, it does. Thank you very much, Doctor. Thanks a lot. It's given me a lot more clarity. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. So
great.
Spread the gospel, no couching.
I did say that was the last question, but the very last question, Joy.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you. I'll not take your time. My mom was diagnosed of cataract. So some years back, she was in the US. She was to undergo the cataract surgery, but out of fear, she's about 80 plus. Out of fear, she couldn't do that. And then she came back and then continued with her medications and glasses. I don't know if, and she's been fine all the while. I don't know if it's dangerous not to have it done, or maybe there's something else she could do to help that. Thank you.
Dr. Dino, why do you take the very last question?
No, you can. I was passing it over to you because I'm sure, you
could
probably see a lot
very,
of that.
very last, because Flora is going to come up with another question after this.
Lord have mercy.
Okay, So you say your mom is in her 80s, okay?
Yes.
Most people with
early
most
80s.
people, sorry?
Early 80s.
Yes.
82,
Most
yeah.
people who have cataract surgery are late 60s, 70s, 80s. And if they haven't done it by then, they haven't done it in their 90s. So your mom is definitely the age whereby she should have cataract surgery if she's said to need it. Now, I haven't seen anyone over the years since I've been practicing that is not afraid of having cataract surgery. Every single person is scared of having cataract surgery. And what they need is a bit of explanation that it's a short operation, okay? You might be in theater for about, depends on the technique, you have 20, 30 minutes, and you go home the same day. You're not going to be put to sleep to do that, so that the risks of anesthesia to your general health are cut out. It's usually a local anesthesia, which basically means you're given anesthetic around the eye. And the operation after the local anesthesia should be painless. So I think your mother needs quite a lot of encouragement. And sometimes it takes having a close friend who has had it done, and then they now get convinced that, okay, maybe I should have it done. And when they do, they now advise people, let's have the cataract surgery done. But however, what I must say is, we don't do cataract surgery just because somebody has a cataract. We do cataract surgery if it's affecting the quality of life, or the quality of sight and the quality of life. So if, for example, you have the same cataract in someone who's a librarian and is very active and looks at small print, or maybe a nurse who needs to look at vials before they prescribe, and they have a cataract, they'll want cataract surgery done much earlier than a retired farmer who lives in the village, doesn't watch television. All he or she does is they have a community setting whereby they sit in a relaxed atmosphere and chat with other people. They are not likely to want to have the cataract. So it's not just the fact that she has a cataract. The question they will ask is how it is affecting her day-to-day life. For example, some people will say, oh, it's not affecting me, yet they need someone to guide them around, or they can't cross the road independently, or people are talking to them, they make out who is talking to them based on the voice recognition, not based on the sight. So we need to find out exactly what the situation is with your mother, and if basically it's affecting her quality of life, I advise she has it done. I mean, you could also do research and see where surgery is done, and try and find out from people who've had surgery there with their experience and things. But I mean, you definitely can get the surgery done in Nigeria comfortably without going home the same day. But like I said, you need to find out whether she needs it, and then you take it from there. Thank you.
All right.